Which creepy urban legend turned out to be true? When I was about 12 years old, a friend and I were playing in the woods that were known for being creepy. While building a fort, a strange man snuck up behind us and yelled at us to get off his land and never come back, yada yada yada. It really startled us as we knew the land was a public area and had never been threatened by an adult before. Several years later, we found out he was an actual bank robber, wanted by the FBI for years. We were building our fort a few feet from his stash. In the end, despite his meticulous planning and execution, it was a simple case of bad luck that led the police to Gugajin's home. He had hidden all the details and equipment for his robberies, his maps, face masks, survival rations, weapons, and ammunition in a concrete drainage pipe, sealed inside individual PVC pipes, which were found by two young teenage boys who were playing in the woods near their home in Radnor, Pennsylvania. This find enabled police to construct a more accurate profile, and after questioning local residents, they had a list of names which eventually led to Gugajin's arrest in 2002. Oh damn, they must have based Gosling's character in Place Beyond the Pines on him. His robbery routine was basically exactly what happened in that movie. Story 2. I lived near a lake and there was an urban legend that there were huge lake monsters near the hydroelectric dam. Most people thought it was just some fisherman's tall tales. We all guessed it was just a twist on the classic The One That Got Away. Turns out divers went into the water behind the dam for a routine inspection to see if there was any damage after months of heavy flooding in the area. Apparently, one of the divers got too close to what he originally thought was a large moss-covered rock or boulder, until it moved and tried to latch onto the diver's arm. Apparently, there are plus 200-pound catfish behind the dam which thrive on the dead fish that go through the hydroelectric portion of the dam. The agitated water makes it easier for the large catfish to breathe and grow past what is commonly found in the area. And the lack of fishers, as all commercial fishing is banned for at least 1,000 meters, means these fish are truly free to grow to truly enormous sizes. Mike Rowe from Dirty Jobs was offered a chance at noodling. The night before, he was laying in his hotel room and saw a special on noodling and how people had lost fingers and parts of hands doing it. He said that it was the closest he ever came to backing out on an episode. I have plenty of friends who scuba at the base of the dam. Most now always dive with a spear gun or don't dive at all at the base of the dam, all because of the massive catfish that could swallow them whole. It's crazy. Story 3. There's some weird stuff going on in Maine. I can see where Stephen King gets his inspiration. Only place I've ever seen a ghost. I hate to admit that because I don't believe in them. And know a few other people with weird stories. There are some places that definitely just feel off there. Still love it though, it's a beautiful place. I grew up around Sabatis Mountain. It's more of a big hill, but that's beside the point. The woods in that whole area feel very, very off. My mom used to make me and my siblings and cousins go hiking with her in the woods and up the mountain. We were always terrified and would beg not to go. I don't know what is wrong with the woods around that area, but I know for a fact they are too damn quiet. It's as if every living thing in those woods is holding its breath in fear. To this day, any nightmares I have are set at my grandparents' house and business, which are surrounded by those very woods. Dad told me this story a few days ago. Grew up in the Northeast, and as a kid, he used to walk his bike through these woods every day to and from school because it was a shortcut. One day after baseball, he had this eerie feeling that he was being watched and it spooked him. Said there was nothing and nobody around, Dad's silent. So he ran out as fast as he could and never took that shortcut again. Bothered him a lot and he thought about it a lot. One day, maybe a decade ago, some sort of nutty psychic came into his bar and people were playing along with her or whatever, hand readings or something, I don't know. He decides to approach her and he told me, quote, "I kid you not, she looked at me and asked me if I wanted to know who was watching me all those years ago in the woods on my way home from school." He was totally spooked and she said it was himself. He had thought about that moment so much over the last 45 years that when he was a kid, he was able to sense himself looking at himself. Dad told me it was the spookiest thing that has ever happened to him. The whole story came up because he looked off last week, so I asked him what was up and he told me that story. Said he never told anybody about the incident as a kid, and he never told anybody what she told him, but to this day, he doesn't know what to think about it. Now, my dad's usually a funny guy, but I could tell he was serious and generally disturbed by the whole thing and tried not to think about it. Who knows, man? Who knows? You could obviously come up with scientific explanations like woods are generally creepy and psychics just say things that are broad and apply to many people, waiting for one to really have an impact on someone. Who's to say she hadn't said that same thing to 100 people before she said it to my dad? I don't know. But I do think from the way it disturbs him that something more is going on. I'm a man of science, but I've had some interesting experiences with the human psyche and the power of the mind, so I'm open to the idea that the mind is powerful enough to do something we just cannot and will not ever be able to understand. Like, I would be skeptical of anyone claiming they can read minds or speak telepathically, but regardless of what anyone says about the subject, I know for a fact that under an extreme amount of psychedelics, I was able to communicate to my friends without speaking a word. I'm sure he is open to the idea that the mind is incomprehensibly complex and capable of some supernatural phenomena that science just really can't explain. Regardless, if it could, he's going to believe what he believes because he experienced it. This one really creeped me out and has my mind going in directions I'm scared to keep moving forward into. How did he look at himself? Is he like a time traveler? Some other dimension stuff going on? I'm intrigued and creeped out at the same time. Story 4. When I was a kid, my dad would take me and my brother to High Rock. It's a neat overlook and we could play on the rocks. It was fun, but also a little sobering, as much as things can be for kids, because a girl had died in a hang gliding accident, if I remember right. As you drive up to the parking lot for the overlook, the road continues on into the woods. We asked our dad where it went, and he told us that you'd be driving down the road and suddenly armed guards would pop out of the woods to stop you because there was a secret government base there. That's the case, except it isn't really a secret. It's Raven Rock, which is a nuclear bunker that can act as a remote Pentagon if the country is attacked. Cheney went there during September 11th while Bush was taken somewhere else. You will be detained if you trespass on the property. I went back to High Rock a few years ago while visiting family, and while hanging out at the overlook, a truck of teenagers showed up. They asked if I knew what was up with the access road, and I told them Raven Rock and not to keep going because they'd be detained. They decided they wanted to check it out anyway. An hour later, when I left High Rock, those kids had not come back yet, so I figured they were getting their butts chewed out by a soldier. Raven Rock is the headquarters of the Enclave in Fallout 3. High Rock is a dope place to go, but yeah, don't mess around with the fences for Site R, Raven Rock. There's armed guards and electrified fences surrounding the entire mountain. It's probably the most significant thing about the area. Supposedly, there's an underground highway that connects it straight to Camp David near Thurmont, Maryland. It's only a few miles away, so it wouldn't surprise me. Anyway, people from my town and surrounding ones go there all the time because there's nothing else to do in such a rural area. It's neat that it's so close to such an important secret government facility. Story 5. Sewer alligators. If alligators and other animals are flushed or disposed of into plumbing, yeah, they can survive and hang out. The most famous Los Angeles alligator was Reggie, who now lives in a zoo. He was 6 feet long when captured and lived in a lake in South Bay for years. Alligators can easily survive being flushed. They evolved to be submerged in water. Once in the sewers, they can eat rats and cockroaches. Plus, they also scavenge for dead meat, and they can tolerate pretty rancid stuff that may end up going down the drain via the garbage disposal. Story 6. Cropsy, sort of like the boogeyman of Staten Island. During the 70s and 80s, kids on the island would go missing, and the urban legend would attribute it to Cropsy. As it turned out, there really was a crazy and serial who was responsible for it all. He was caught and convicted. There's a great documentary about it. It used to be on Netflix, not sure if it still is, called Cropsy. Check it out if you get a chance. There were a lot of other rumors that he was involved with Satanists or that he was passing the children around in the underground tunnels, which, who knows, may or may not be true, but there was little evidence of either. They did, however, have witnesses who saw him with kids shortly before they disappeared and found a body right next to one of his campsites. A lot of people who went missing in the 60s and 80s were the victims of despicable people. So when you have an urban legend that says that, quote, a bunch of kids went missing in the 70s and 80s and everyone says it was this weird boogeyman type character, I'm always inclined to think it's actually true even without the guy being caught. My dad used to live around the Greenbelt back in the day and said during the Boy Scout night hikes, the older kids would tell the younger kids that if they left the group, Cropsy would get them. Crazy stuff. Fun fact, the College of Staten Island used to be the mental hospital that they shut down. When they shut it down, they let Cropsy out. I used to go there, and there was a parking lot with like one damn light for all the cars right next to the old mental institution buildings. I thought about the Cropsy killer whenever I came out of a late class and looked at those buildings before getting in my car. Dude, that's some scary stuff, and it's weird that in the 70s when people started to go missing, society was just like, yeah, it's probably just another boogeyman, and then came up with a nickname for it. If you're enjoying these creepy urban legend stories, please do consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel so I can keep giving you more, and it really helps me out. Let's go ahead and move on to the next story. Story 7. That there is something making people disappear in our area in Nevada. As a kid, it was more so they were hinting at aliens. Then as we grew up, the disappearances have been a little too eerie, and it's been suspected that there's investigations that have been going on as to whether or not there's a serial killer in our area. I carry a firearm when traveling through and don't stop until I get to the cities. If you guys are ever coming through, just don't stop for anyone, especially after the darkness sets in. Reminds me of this one time I was getting off the swing shift at about 1 a.m. and I stopped to get gas. There were these two guys, they were asking for money out of gas, they said. I told them I only had about $20 to my name, but I handed them a few dollars and went in and put half the rest on my pump. After I finished filling up, I saw them awkwardly trying to fill a gas can with what little gas they could get with what I'd given them. I didn't see a car around, so I told them I'd give them a ride to theirs. On the way there, they told me how nice my car was, asked what I did, how I was doing. I told them I was super in debt over the car, overdrawn in my bank account, and I answered phones up the street for a tech support company. Then the guy told me he had an Xbox for sale, nearly new, and he'd let me have it for $50. I told him that's a pretty good deal, but like I said, I've got no money till payday and that's going to rent. As it was, I was planning to pick up some bread, ramen, and eggs on the way home and plan to live on that until payday. So we got to their car, parked in a dark area of an underpass, and as I stopped and they looked at each other, I had the sudden realization I was screwed. There was this super tense, awkward moment, then the guy sitting up front in my car sighed, shook his head, hopped out, and walked to their car. The other guy followed after. That was the moment I realized they were planning to rob me and only did it because they realized I've got nothing to steal. Story 8. I went to a university near Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. It used to be a POW camp and a military hospital before the college bought the entire property for $1 in the 1960s. Since there are really only 3 universities near Valley Forge, PA, it's not going to be hard to deduce which college it was, lol. Anyways, there was a rumor that underground tunnels and all sorts of stuff was left abandoned in the abandoned sections of the college. Sure enough, it was true. We found a tunnel hatch under our carpet in our dorm room, 2 hatches on the first floor, furthest most first floor dorm room of each building. It was literally like stepping into 1945. Everything was preserved down there and the tunnels were massive. We eventually ended up in an underground garage where there were like 4 Jeeps parked but all the tires had dry rotted. We realized this was actually beneath our soccer field. Anyway, the tunnels led to the cafeteria, the admin building, every dorm, and then an old abandoned section of our campus that we had no way of entering topside. We soon realized that this was the hospital and morgue. When we got out of the tunnels and walked the floor, it was still like 1945. All the hospital beds were still there, the surgical curtains were still there, hell, even the tools like the scalpel, saw, pliers, etc. were still on their trays. It was like everyone all of a sudden up and left and nothing had been moved since then. The morgue still had its slabs and sometimes we would dare each other to slide in there for a period of time. But yeah, it was an urban legend on campus until the 3 of us decided to risk expulsion to see if it was true, and it was. Wait, you would get expelled for that? How would they even know? America and all its secrets and tunnels. Story 9. Freddy Krueger is based on a real story. Hear me out. There's a small ethnic group local to Southeast Asia, the Hmong people. They've been oppressed for years by various countries, so they fought with the US during the Vietnam Civil War. As you know, we lost, and the North Vietnamese were gearing up to end the Hmong people who had fought for the Southern Vietnamese. So the US airlifted a bunch of Hmong families to the US, primarily in California and Minnesota. One of the recent immigrants was a young man. He was perfectly healthy, but suddenly died in his sleep. No one knew how he died. It's guessed it was a heart attack, but an autopsy wasn't done. This sent a panic throughout the community. There's a Hmong legend of a spirit that enters your dreams and ends you. Hmong people were terrified. They were also in a new community without access to some old traditions to protect them. Young men started staying awake, trying to avoid the monster. They downed caffeine, and they were actually scared enough that it caused stress to their hearts, and they died. Eventually, 117 men died from Hmong sleeping sickness. Communities in other Southeast Asian countries have similar tales as the Hmong, with Brugada being the real culprit and not just stress. It is a hugely underdiagnosed condition because often there are no symptoms and you can only diagnose it via ECG. And some people do not even show an abnormal ECG unless they take a specific type of medicine beforehand. The average age of diagnosis is 40, and it is much more common among males. Story 10. Throwaway, since I'm telling this story in real life. There was an urban legend at my high school that one of the janitors quit because he saw a set of bloody footprints down the hallway. My bad, that was me. One day, I was staying late to complete a class project and dropped a heavy glass pane on my toe. It left a huge gash that I couldn't get to stop bleeding. Now, my school was the kind of place where having a shoe full of blood would get you a week's detention instead of a hospital visit, so I made sure to check around before I limped home to bandage myself up. Our high school was a rectangle with a sunken library in the middle, so we had hallways that framed it. I was at one corner, and at the other end was the janitor finishing up mopping the hallway. As soon as he turned the corner, I took off my shoes and socks since they were soaked. I couldn't properly walk and walked down the hallway and out the door. This left a perfect trail of bloody footprints all the way until the hallway dried out, which happened to be exactly where the exit door was. As the rest of the story goes, he turned around when he heard the door close and found a trail of bloody footprints down the hallway with no one there to take responsibility. Dude quit on the spot. Sorry to freak you out, Mr. Janitor. Ghosts aren't real, or at least don't do that. Getting a detention for bloody shoes is the real horror story here. Anyway, I'm willing to bet that dude went straight to church after. Story 11. In my city, Jakarta, there is a popular urban legend of a ride-hailing driver booked by a female ghost. There are several stories, but I remember this one clearly as this one was told by the driver himself to me. He got an order from a female at 11 p.m. Usually, most motorbike riders wouldn't accept orders this late due to safety reasons. But this man was chasing his last point so he could get the bonus, and he took the order. At first, he was rather suspicious because the destination point was located at the front of Jerik Purut's entry gate, a well-known cemetery complex. So he sent her a message, "Is the destination correct, miss?" And he got a short reply, "Yes." So he just drove and picked the girl up. There was nothing suspicious about the girl. Long black hair, red lipstick, wearing blue jeans and white shirt, just like any normal girl. So they went to the girl's residence. The driver then said that she didn't talk at all during the trip, but he really didn't mind. He just drove through the usual route. The distance between the pickup point and the destination point was not far, only 5 kilometers away, maybe about 2.5 miles, and he knew the road very well. He estimated they'd arrive in 5 minutes or less. When they were about to reach the destination, he asked the girl, "Where should I drop you off, miss?" But there was no response or answer from the girl. He looked at the mirror and he almost fell off of his motorbike. The girl just wasn't there anymore, but that wasn't the worst part. When he looked around, he suddenly realized that he was already inside of the cemetery complex. He drove frantically to the gate and went to a 24-hour coffee shop nearby. There were a few customers there. The shop owner looked at him and asked, "What did you do in the cemetery at 1 a.m.? He quickly checked his phone, and damn right, it was 1 a.m. He then opened the ride-hailing app to check the order from that girl, and as you've guessed it by now, there was no order from her at all, and he was still 1 order less from his bonus that day. Well, how rude. She both didn't pay and didn't even let him get a bonus. Alright, I hope you guys enjoyed the video and didn't get creeped out too much, because if you made it this far, I'm sure you're also going to enjoy. Have you had a creepy feeling about someone that came true? Story 1 is horribly unbelievable. I don't know if you can combine those two, but you've got to hear it to believe it yourself. I'll see you in that video, and thank you for watching this one.